Hey everybody, it's me, Cody. You know who I am. Who are you people that are also with me? I think other people know, but hey, it's a formality.
I'm Emperor Tiger Star, and I'm all about maps and stuff.
And I'm Tristan from Step Back History, the history channel about history stuff.
We got a special time in for you today, children. So, one of our fans had a suggestion. Who was that fan? What was his name? Tristan?
His name is Ace. He's a longtime fan of the show.
Yeah, so he had a suggestion saying, hey, that random Arabia conversation you had, theorizing about alternate worlds, was pretty interesting. Why don't you do that again about War Plan Red? So we thought, hell, why not? Let's do it. So what we're gonna do is, since this is an alternate history channel, we're gonna theorize live basically what would happen if War Plan Red actually existed. So first off, what is War Plan Red? If you could tell by the flag in the background, obviously it has something to do with Britain. So, if one of you wants to start off, who was it against? Who planned War Plan Red? We'll go from there.
Well, the United States was very paranoid, and so we had color-coded plans against everyone, and red was for the British Empire, especially Canada.
Yeah. So the thing about the United States, and actually most countries do this to some extent, but the US was doing it in a big way in the early 20th century when they were sort of knowing that they were quickly going to be eclipsing the other major empires with their rate of growth. And so they planned something called War Plan Red, which was going to be their figuring out what to do in case of a war with Britain, specifically about how to deal with the interesting strategic problem of invading a country that is sparsely populated but gigantic.
So
Yeah, pretty much.
So this plan was around like the 1920s and 30s. That's when it was really developed. So if this plan actually happened, I think we're basically going to be talking about like interwar period armies and militaries fighting each other. Or if you want, we can do since it was like in the late 1930s that it was actually finalized. It could be like we could have like basically around like 1939. That's when this hypothetical war between the United States and in Britain gets kicked off. So we would have the militaries from both of those times going against each other.
Yeah,
What do you guys
I will add. Well, I will add in the OTL of this, when it was just a plan that never got put into action, it did have actual historical consequences. Not huge historical consequences, but when the U.S. declassified it in the early 70s, it was a period where Canada and the U.S. were not in the best of times. This was when we had Pierre Elliott Trudeau and the U.S. had Richard Nixon, and they really didn't like each other, especially because Canada retained its alliance with Cuba. And so the declassification of Project Red was actually made the Canadians kind of mad.
I mean, it's kind of understandable because it involved a lot of very questionable methods.
It's okay. Once we discover oil, we'll just bring out that old plan anyway, and then the Canadians won't have to worry about it because we'll invade you. Oh boy.
But yeah, let's use it using the theoretical war breaking out in the interwar period. So we have to think about what kinds of things could cause the British Empire to stick together, so that if Britain ended up in a war with the United States, it would be able to drag in its holdings. I believe the plan was planned for its holdings in India, the Anzac countries, which is Australia, New Zealand, and pretty much all of the British Empire being thrown at the United States, which it'd be interesting to think about how could that have possibly happened in like the Depression.
I think the funniest thing about this entire idea is that these are two countries that really in no way should need to compete, because wars and militaries and everything are always over, you know, basically there's like no other solution. I'm thinking of what situation would even occur that Britain and America would need to fight a war against one another.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking.
Only thing I could think of that would drive anything bananas would be something like in a Depression era. In the Depression era, there was a lot of political turmoil of some sort of major nationalist movement taking hold in either the United States or Britain.
So what we could have is we could have those. We could have maybe the fascist coup in the United States actually happens.
Or, the business plot.
Yeah, the business plot actually happens. And somehow the United States just magically becomes fascist and nobody does anything about it. So we could do that. Or we could have the fascists in Britain take over, which I think is less.
Yeah. Or, you know what? If you're going to have a total war between both, I imagine both being successful would be pretty successful in that matter, because if you think about it, if you took like the most toxic, worst form of American and British nationalism, both of them would put each other in the crosshairs because of, at that point, 150-year-old grievances.
There might be a third possibility where like World War II in Europe either happens earlier, maybe at the same time, and this takes place in the early 40s, who knows. And we have like a War of 1812 situation where for whatever reason, we decide to like not stop trading with Nazi Germany, and Britain gets stressed enough to try to shoot down one of our ships. And then because they directly attack us, then we go to war.
Yeah.
Ooh, I have an idea. What if the United States simply never fought in World War I? So those anti-German sentiments never actually arose in the United States. So
I hate those German sentiments.
Those Germans, I hate them so much. No, so the German sentiment
sounds like delicious candy or something.
It does. So yeah, what if there's actually like German sentiments in the United States during the 1930s? They see Hitler rise, and that German sort of cultural identity was never like squashed out during World War I because there was no anti-German sentiment.
So America gets taken over by evil Quakers.
Well, or I mean, at least that makes the fascist plot or the business plot a lot more realistic because there's an actual considerable base, at least in the Midwest.
America's new capital is Philadelphia.
No, America's new capital is in Minnesota.
Okay, when I think of like German American pockets, I always think of Pennsylvania. Am I wrong on that?
No, you're not wrong.
You're not wrong. I mean, that's like
the problem is like that's mainly like Amish, and the Amish would be way too peaceful to become evil fascists and take over the country.
I would say most of the Midwest is considerably German.
Yeah.
I think Iowa, like basically would be like, Iowa and Missouri and all that fun jazz in Illinois.
The German American Bund was popping up all over the U.S. in like the 30s. Which would German American Bund for everyone out there was like the kind of pro-Hitler German ethnic like clubs.
I'm just theorizing.
Like
I'm just thinking about how there would be a popular base that would like allow these people to sort of exist.
So to put the U.S. and UK at war with each other, I would imagine, the U.S. doesn't get into World War I, and World War I like lasts like maybe another year longer, which makes it much worse, much more damaging. Would make the UK with that kind of special relationship have like a lot of like resentment, and like there'd be some sort of like revanchism thing going on.
I like that. That actually it is it's a natural narrative. Man, I cannot speak. It's a natural narrative that explains why this would actually happen. I was thinking like this was crazy. I was thinking like, oh, why would they just randomly fight each other? But it's like if those two actually happen, it's pretty simple. So then the United States is pro-Axis, basically. Or at least they're pro.
Well, I don't know. Like the thing is, like a World War I where this happens, I'm not saying that the Central Powers will win, but the truce would probably be drawn with both sides on more equal footing. So you could even say that there's like a spiral out that Germany might not have the beating it gets at Paris, and that results in Germany not going down the route of putting like a Nazi in power. But I could be wrong on that. I'm not as good at German stuff as like Tiger is.
I mean, the only reason the business plot happened was because they were inspired by the fascists in Germany and Italy. So I'm guessing fascism in Italy could probably still happen because Italy was going to get shit on no matter what. But
yeah,
in Germany, like this is the issue, is that Germany rising to power is fundamental to the United States becoming fascist.
Do we want to just say that this scenario is like 99% impossible, but if it just somehow happened, this is what would happen?
Yeah.
Well, that's implied. That's implied.
You could make some crazy things happen. In these situations where things sound really, really implausible, keep in mind that sometimes really big things can happen with just a few dedicated people who manage to break into the right building and have some guns.
Well, sure. I'm
Tristan,
just
I like
saying
the nitty gritty. I like thinking of the nitty gritty of all of this, of how this happens. So.
I'm just saying, in like for a scenario like this, we could just say, you know what, FDR and Neville Chamberlain or Stanley Baldwin, whoever's PM at this point, they just don't like each other and they just decide to go to war for whatever reason, and it just happens.
But that's not as interesting, though. I think having this narrative where, you know, fascism and German pride rise in the United States, and they like basically, because there's two paths that the United States really could have took. They could have embraced their Anglo heritage, like their original Anglo colonist stuff. Or they could have, you know, basically succumb to the immense German immigration and influence, because basically the entire Midwest was pretty much just German, and they could be like, hey, you know what, we're more German than we are British, so we're going to side with Germany. Or we're going to become,
or even like the Anglo-Americans. Like, if you have this situation where the U.S. doesn't involve itself in World War I, and the UK gets like really, really pissed off at the U.S. over it, you could have some resentment, and that could grow and that could fester. Yep. And if you have like the drums of war beating across the Atlantic, it could drag over here too.
I'm thinking, oh man, you know what'd be cool? This is gonna sound completely random, but this isn't actually gonna happen. But this isn't part of the scenario. I'm just thinking of if the German Midwest actually became like super fascist, and then maybe there's almost like the South secedes again, but it's only because the
Second American Civil War.
But it's only because the South is super Anglo, and they like Britain, and so it's like it basically divides among those lines, and that'd be weird. You would have almost like, if there was a war plan red, you would have British sympathizers. You would have, especially in the egalitarian South, or the place, you know, New England or places like that with heavy Anglo, you know, influences and stuff. They'd be like, why are we fighting war against Britain? Why aren't we fighting war against Germany? And then it'd be almost like a divide and a division within the United States itself. That'd be something like that. Yeah.
So there's a couple things too we have to look at when we look at the geography of trying to invade Canada. So for a few things, Canada is ginormous. It is the second largest country on Earth, but it has a very small population, and also it's divided in a lot of key ways. So the way that Project Red, War Plan Red, was designed was that and this is true, the strategic importance, especially in a war that's kind of fighting Britain and Canada, is the maritime provinces. And so they had a lot of their focus of their initial invasions on like Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. And imagine that. I mean, Newfoundland is going to be in this war as well, but Newfoundland's not part of Canada at this point.
So I'm imagining the biggest issue with invading Canada would be just the infrastructure, pretty much. Because I would imagine it'd almost be like a Vietnam-like situation where you could capture the South, which is like 90% of the population, but Canada could basically just, you know, continue going north. Not a Vietnam situation, a Russia situation.
I just love like a British nationalism inspired guerrilla warfare. Like, it'd be the funniest thing ever. But the thing is, like, you have the Maritimes, which are key strategic provinces for the areas of trying to get like stuff in and out of Canada. Like it's where all the stuff that goes to Europe goes, but also it's there's the St. Lawrence, and I think there's a couple other big geographical issues like the St. Lawrence and what the Quebecois would do, because the Quebecois opposed World War I, and in this alternate situation, who knows where the Quebecois could have gone on that?
Puppet Quebec.
Yeah, because Quebec had a form of nationalism, but they were like super religious, like really, really, really Catholic, which would be interesting. And then there's also the fact that there's a couple things to add into this as well, which is the prairie provinces, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, at this point were very lightly, sparsely populated. Like they had only been settled about 15, 20 years ago. Like Canada didn't do its westward expansion until like the late 19th, early 20th century. So those provinces are really empty. And then like British Columbia is like all by itself. So there's like all of that to deal with as well. And also the prairies are settled, and they are settled by a lot of Germans. So there's also that.
Yeah, because this is just like the Turtle Dove Southern Victory series, where the U.S. invaded Canada in World War I, and they kind of did a war plan red thing, and then they made Quebec a puppet state.
This is very much like the Southern Victory series, now I'm thinking about it, because the entire point of that was that the United States becomes more German-friendly and the South becomes more Anglo-friendly. That's why that sounded so familiar. That's why.
Although, personally, not only would I make a Quebec puppet state, but I would also make an Inuit puppet state, the giant People's Republic of Nunavut.
Would you need to make an Inuit puppet state, or would you just?
I would just do it because I purely want to. It would look cool on a map.
Just change the map. I would be terrified if you were in charge of any office. Your entire thing, the closest thing to a president you would be is Polk, and your entire thing would be just change.
I would never own slaves. How dare you?
Your entire thing would be just, I want to change the map. We're gonna change the map. I'm sure like 5 people got that joke.
I mean, you wouldn't necessarily be wrong, because, for example, when we made the border with Canada, in theory it was a straight line, but because we made that border in a time where that was absolutely impossible to make a perfect straight line, the actual border of Canada is like a zigzag. It only appears like a straight line if you zoom out far enough. I would totally devote resources to make sure that we make this a straight border once and for all, and just completely fix that problem. And then that one part where like the border goes over
it goes over like a lake.
Yeah, it goes over a lake, and then it makes like a little teeny tiny part in like British Columbia. I forget the name of the city, but it's like a teeny tiny town.
It's Ontario.
No, not Ontario. I'm talking about all the way west. There's in between Vancouver Island and the border, since it's still, quote, a straight line, it goes over the lake or the sea or whatever, and then there's like a single city in British Columbia that's cut off from the U.S. but is technically still a part of the U.S. Mm-hmm. That cannot be. We have to somehow either buy the road that goes to that city or just sell it to Canada for money, just because that's a horrible border. Why would we have a city cut off like that? There's got to be a better way, gosh darn it. I would totally make that a lot better.
Gosh darn it.
One of the craziest things about the war in this situation, and this is where I don't know if because it's never happened on the continent, and that is, how does this war happen when you have two populated centers, like both countries, both belligerents have occupied centers on opposite sides that border on two separate oceans with a mountain, first of all, a mountain range, and then a whole huge amount of empty prairies between them. Like, how do you make that happen?
This is that's the thing I find so fascinating about this, is that there is no these are almost like the two last countries on Earth that would actually need to fight each other, not just because of culture or linguistic, but because, the one thing that Britain dominates is Navy, especially in the 20th century. The United States, the United States had a great Navy, but there's no way they're going to compete with the Empire.
Oh yeah.
So Britain
This is
Britain wins.
also
Britain wins
this
that
is like
department.
yeah, this is keep in mind this is the 1920s. So this is
Yeah.
before America, like the global spanning dominating empire of today. This is the America that doesn't want to even have a permanent military.
Yeah.
But if this takes place in the 1930s and we're in a situation where, let's just say, the war completely starts from like Britain's first move, like they attack us, then it could be a Pearl Harbor situation where we motivate ourselves enough to completely build a navy large enough to completely outclass the British. Because, like, for example, we didn't need the navy that we got to outclass the Japanese during World War II, but we went overboard and did it anyway. And so, for the idea of Britain, where it's like, oh my gosh, we need a navy to beat the British. Come on, America, do the patriotic thing and build a aircraft carrier or something. Then I think we could totally do it.
Yeah, and to talk about like the Maritimes again as a strategic point, the Maritimes during the American Revolution were a really big British like port, like it was strategically important, so it would probably come up again.
I'm thinking, and then the second point I was going to get to was the U.S. is just so, wide, like you said, mountains and prairies and all that fun jazz. Like, what would even be the strategic reason to invade those areas? Like, I don't think the British ever in their history have actually crossed such a wide amount, It's always been either on the coast or they've subjugated. I mean, I think probably the largest has been India. So I can't imagine the British military crossing the United States and taking it over in like one huge invasion. There'd
be no way.
Yeah, there'd be like no way. So if anything, the war would be an absolute standstill because there's no way the British are going to invade, but there's no way the United States is going to escape. I mean,
well, in this situation though, if America did find that it needed to like pacify Canada in order to focus on fighting the British, elsewhere,
Canada would be like the only place where there would be a conflict.
Which is why it was the main focus of War Plan Red.
Oh, yeah. I know. I'm just I'm thinking of the whole grand context of the war and, after Canada. That's what I'm thinking of.
Okay. Yeah, because I do think that Canada, with like with exceptions of like some minor skirmishes and violence, I think that the U.S. would just need to take the Maritimes and like Montreal, Toronto, and like maybe
Winnipeg,
Victoria. Maybe. Winnipeg was like barely a village.
Sure, but wasn't it like an important like railroad hub from like west to east?
Yeah, but that would be. I mean, maybe you could take Winnipeg, and then like you have those, you pretty much have 99% of the country down, and you don't really need to bother going into the boonies to like hunt down some crazy guy with like a shotgun. There's just not enough people. So then the main issue then is fighting is then the British, the like guerrilla war that you're talking about would probably be would be over the Maritimes, because the British would have their staging ground in Newfoundland and the Americans would have theirs in like New England, and then they would all fight over like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick.
Although part of the attack did call for a gas attack over Halifax, so that might lower resistance just a little bit.
Haligas.
Yes.
I am just that was such a knee slapper. I'm just wheezing over here. Oh boy.
Oh! I remembered what it's called. It's called Point Roberts. That's the area I'm talking about in Washington. It's literally just like a city that's barely on the boundary, so it's technically like its own exclave, but it really should be a part of British Columbia. It's ridiculous.
So basically, do you think America could actually take Canada?
Yes.
I think that 95% of the country they could.
Yeah.
And then the real fighting would be about the, like I said, Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, because whoever controls that would control the access to the St. Lawrence. They would control the like Atlantic trade with Europe. So that's what the whole fight would be over.
So
we'd give New Brunswick to Maine.
Finally, dreams come true. We get
and
to
Nova Scotia can be given to Massachusetts as the long overdue replacement for giving up Maine back in 1820.
Yeah, but just like going through the other things, like Toronto was a fort to fight in the War of 1812, which wouldn't be super useful 110 years later.
Yeah.
Montreal is an island, but also Quebec. Well, Montreal is mostly an English city at this point, but Quebec would probably be Quebec and the prairies because of the German and Quebecois nationalism stuff would probably be not too enthusiastic about, fighting for Mother Britain. So I imagine those would not be hard nuts to crack. And then the rest of them, it's just too big and wide to defend. And all you really need to do is take like 2 small cities to take like the entire Western Canada at this point. So it'd be pretty easy.
There could be like a third Ryle rebellion.
I mean, yeah, but we just don't have the people, and we didn't have the people back then either.
Well, I know, but I mean, if America's invading Canada, we'll just start like funding like Ryle rebels or whatever.
And
then now we'd also not only have a puppet Quebec, not only a puppet Inuit nation, we would also have a puppet Realistan in Manitoba and Saskatchewan.
Man, now I'm just thinking about like how by modern day, after these war had died down in Canada, got its independence back, and you'd have this reference of like Canada being like of these like Canuck commandos.
or you know what? Since Riel was wasn't Riel actually like French?
He was Métis, which is a ethnic group that's a mix of Indigenous people and French people.
Okay, maybe we could just give it to Quebec. We just annex British Columbia and Ontario. We still make a puppet Inuit stand, but then we give everything else to Quebec.
And I'll just have Ontario for myself. Fiefdom. Personal fiefdom.
I'm gonna stay down here, and I'm gonna say at least I never stepped foot in Canada. I feel so happy. Oh boy.
Ouch.
Yeah, that's right. Somebody said.
But you know what?
Somebody said Cody is going to create Canadian internment camps. Oh, don't read my mind like that.
To push it like to extra crazy while we're at it. What about like taking Manitoba and then having like serious fights over it because of like Stalingrad type situations where the Americans don't prepare for the Canadian winter and like their stuff gets stuck in the mud, and
that's why we specifically have a squadron of Alaskan volunteers. They'll be able to handle it.
Mm-hmm. All 5 of them.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because America, we can win with those odds.
This is what we'll do. If there is a war, we would basically just have to sacrifice a goat. And then the spiritual embodiment of Teddy Roosevelt would come down, and his mustache would wrap us all in just warmth. And we would have the spirit of the Rough Riders to go and capture the capital of Canada. It would work.
Now, the other question is, in the long term, who would win this war? Because the USA has the industrial power, but the UK has the just vast reaches of territory, ocean control, and resources of India, Australia, New Zealand, and whatever's left of Canada, I guess, in this situation.
Well, here's the thing. The UK relies a lot on foreign imports, especially for like food and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, during World War I, they relied a lot of like getting beef from places like Argentina and stuff. And despite the British Navy, we would pretty much have the Western Hemisphere down, especially once we take Canada. And I imagine if we take Canada, Britain, because like the U.S. could easily sustain itself food-wise, especially back then. And so I imagine all we would need to do is we build up our Navy and try to find a way to cut off trade for the British just enough to where they'll go, you know what, let's go ahead and make peace or something.
So, and I mean, Emperor Tigerstride, you would be the person who recommends that the U.S. engage in unlimited submarine warfare so that they can compete with Britain on the high seas. And then about 90 years later, invent high sea.
Maybe it doesn't even need to be submarines necessarily, but some sort of blockade.
Because that's the thing is, like, how do you do that when, like, Britain is, like, the masters of the ocean?
Well, that's why I said we built up our Navy first.
I think the thing is that it doesn't even matter if Britain is master of the navy because we have Fortress America. So even if Britain had, they control the navy, there's no way they're going to have an amphibious landing in the United States.
Oh yeah, this war would be the biggest shit show in history. Like nothing,
yeah.
no one would be able to get the upper hand.
But, but in a way, if we still take Canada and maybe like a few other British colonies in the Caribbean or something, I don't know, then we would still win, even if they can't take us and we can't take them, because ultimately we've taken more territory for ourselves.
Yeah, and this wouldn't be so much a fight to the death as much as a geopolitical version of like pulling somebody's leg until someone says uncle.
Yeah. So even if we made like some sort of peace where it's like, okay, the war's over, bye, we'd still have Canada.
Now that I'm thinking about it, in context of the greater war, if somehow magically Hitler is still around, I think Britain would actually have to eventually capitulate because, we didn't even take into consideration the Lend-Lease policy.
If we were part of the Axis, they would lose. No question.
Yeah. So pretty much, eventually, it wouldn't even need to be America beating Britain. America would just have to wait them out. That would be it. Because eventually,
Britain would be divided. Like whenever we have like the Cold War between America and Nazi Germany, instead of with the Soviets, we would divide England to where like Hitler would annex England because it's Germanic, and we'd get Wales and Scotland, and we'd have, instead of a Korean War, we'd have like an Anglo War type thing.
Oof.
Or like they take like half of Scotland, and there'd be like East and West Scotland.
Yes, just West.
Like
we would have a place called Westeros, and they would have a place called Esteros, and they would just continuously fight forever.
If we're gonna do this, we have to have it be the worst border gore possible. We have to divide freaking like half of England, and then it has to be like an island inside of an enclave of German Scotland, and then maybe the Shetland Islands are also American, but then like northern Scotland is America, and then Wales is divided between North Wales is American, South Wales is German, except for like a little tip is also divided between America and German.
And then we get Cornwall to Italy out of
now do you really see the United States like making deals with Nazi Germany in this way? Like, do you see that?
Well, if we're part of the Axis powers, then why not?
It would be funny though. So that's
it would be ridiculous, which is great. What happens to Ireland?
Well, Ireland is neutral, so nothing.
Ireland becomes potatoes. That's it. It just becomes renamed Potato Land.
America's really, 50. America's new 50th state is Ireland.
Yep. And then everybody.
Like, if there is some sort of like magical scenario where America is somehow part of the Axis powers, we win. We would probably want to divide up a lot of places with Germany, because the less land, resources, etc., that Germany could get its hands on after the war, the better position we would have, because we would inevitably enter a Cold War.
Well, I think America. Okay, if we're actually gonna go realistic, and I'm thinking I have a brain blast like Jim Neutron. If we're actually brain bust anyway. If America and Germany actually did somehow, Britain died, Britain went kaplooey, I think they just let Germany take it. To be honest, I think America would pretty much just say, okay, this part of this hemisphere, this is ours. That hemisphere, that's yours. We don't care. And then they'll pretty much just use the same strategy that they did with Britain, but they'll use it with Germany, saying there's no way Germany could potentially invade us because there's this giant ocean. So, as with everything, geography saves America's ass.
And then we'll form Oceania, and they'll form Eurasia, and it'll be a never-ending war.
Yeah.
Oh man, because we haven't even talked about the Soviets and all this. And
Soviet. Oh,
well, if this is a scenario where the Axis win,
well, I'm thinking because the Soviets depended on the Lend-Lease policy too. Everyone depended on the Lend-Lease policy.
Mm-hmm.
And so if America was with the Axis, it's not just because, it's not American military and strategy, it's American industry. And wasn't that thing that Stalin said that the war was won with American brawn, British brains, and Russian blood? So it's like,
Okay, then I guess the way that I was thinking about this was not so much America joining the Axis, but more that America just doesn't get involved in World War II.
well,
But like,
I'm thinking of
Britain,
how
like,
realistic. I'm thinking that if, even if they were neutral and they were still fighting against Britain, there's no way that they would help them. And there's also, if they weren't a part of the Allies, there's no way they would help Russia, you know?
yeah, just I was thinking of a situation where like post World War One, the U.S. and the U.K. have deteriorating relations because the U.S. doesn't get involved, and there's kind of like a sympathy for Nazism, but not like a full fascist takeover. And like the United States is just kind of like Spain or like Portugal in the war. Like, yeah, we're not going to join the war, but if we did, we knew what side we'd be on.
Well, I mean, can you truly have a war during this time, like between Britain and America, without it becoming one side joins the Axis and the other joins the Allies? I mean, like,
I mean, maybe like a three-way war.
but why would
The
America?
devil's three-way.
But why would America, if they're at war with the British, and this is like one of the biggest conflicts in American history, why would they not say like we we're going to reluctantly join this because, our biggest enemy is the British.
Well, the same reason why the Soviet Union didn't declare war against Japan until literally the last minute after we asked them to.
Yeah, but the Soviets were still technically a part of the Allies. And
well,
yeah, I guess I was just thinking more like I was thinking more like the U.S. just like having that neutrality that kept them out of World War One, but like on overdrive, like.
Yeah, but that neutrality will still has the same effects because, they're not giving guns to the British and they're not giving guns to the Soviets, unless you're saying that because they're neutral, they're for some reason giving guns to communists, which they still don't like.
No, they're just not getting involved, or
yeah, if they're
like
not getting
the British
involved,
go to war with them to like force them to.
Yeah, like if they're not getting involved, then it's still the same effect. It's still Germany and it's still Russia and Britain don't have the guns, which means Germany has a far better chance at succeeding. So it doesn't even matter if America doesn't help out Germany, because Germany's going to basically take the advantage of the other side not having weapons, and because America's just like so that's what I was getting at.
Okay, well then I guess like the thing is that just if that happened, then the USA would be at a different place at like the new peace treaty situation. Because like if they just didn't get involved in the war and the World War II is just over and Nazis win, then it's like, hey, guess we're just gonna be here now.
We're gonna keep Canada now.
America things.
Canada's fine.
I imagine at that point it would be the U.S. focusing on like, building its Monroe Doctrine to a point where it's pretty much got an empire of the Western Hemisphere or something.
Oh yeah. Well,
not like literal conquest, but like tributary states.
Yeah, like we're basically talking Hearts of Iron, fascist American empire game, basically. And whenever that happens, we all know that America's just gonna invade literally everybody else, and you're gonna create an empire like that.
Hey guys, if you want protection from the new Nazi empire that's ruling half the world, join us.
Yeah, freedom.
I'm thinking what would happen to the royal family, the poor royal family in this entire situation.
Normally they couldn't to Canada, but we already got to Canada.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. So they couldn't go to Canada because America has it. So I would just imagine poor Queen Elizabeth have to go to Australia, and that would be their last. Aussies and the Kiwis would be the last ditch effort for the entire British Empire.
Yeah, it'd be the last vestige of democracy on Earth.
Oh, it's the Royal Sheila of Australia.
There'd be more.
Can you just imagine this last Anzac, just the last bastion of good and kindness on the planet, while
nobody does anything.
Australia and New Zealand unite together to fight the Americans and the Nazis as New Australia.
I would just imagine nobody would even do anything in that situation. They'd be so far away and they'd be so out of everybody's hair that they just say, okay, fine. Britain,
Japan would just be like, "Oh, this will be great."
Oh yeah, Japan. Oh yeah, I forgot about Japan. Japan's gonna do some shit. I think Australia could have fought off Japan easy. I'm not even joking. I think they easily could have fought off Japan.
Yeah, I can see
Sure,
it just being fought to a standstill.
they'll just take over New Zealand, and then Australia will just awkwardly sit there.
Oh yeah. New Zealand would just be like, "Hey guys, can you help us out? Our Kiwis are getting slaughtered." No, it's okay. It's fine. We're gonna stay on the big continent. We already lost everything else.
But then I imagine that
Our
these
desert
big global
will protect us.
I imagine these big global empires wouldn't last more than like a generation or two before they started cracking up as well.
Yeah.
Like I imagine the Germans, if they conquered all of Europe, they wouldn't be able to hang on to a lot of these countries for very long.
No.
Well, Europe, it might be possible, but they would definitely lose like any like
they would have
part
to,
of Africa or.
I would say the way that they could do it is not by having Nazism be the entire ideology, but if fascism itself could like transcend to just be like, they were basically doing that. They're doing that in France. They're doing that in Hungary. So it's not just
Vichy everything.
Yeah, so it's not just like, oh, everybody is Nazis now. Hail Germany. It's Germany like awoken something within Europe, and that would be the way that they would spin it. So wouldn't it be like, oh, the French and the Hungarians and the Italians are subjects of Nazi Germany? It's that Nazi Germany is the sort of head state of this new European order, kind of like they are.
Probably some sort of European Union, but all fascist.
Every single time Germany is in charge of anything, it is always a European Union. That's how it will always be. So
that's been, the thing is, the European Union, if you think about it, has been Germany's geopolitical goal since it unified. Really.
Oh, I know. Oh yeah, Bismarck's dream, and it's real. It's a thing. So good job. You got your dream, Bismarck. Hope you're glad. But yeah, so that's kind of, it would pretty much just be a Nazi. And that, what I was getting at is that if you establish that fascism is a legitimate form of government and that it basically is superior to capitalism and communism, after one or two generations, it wouldn't even have to be about war anymore. It would be more about, it wouldn't be a negative reinforcement. It would become a positive reinforcement. It would become, and so that could actually work.
Yeah, and I could see it being actually really successful in a situation where like the war finishes and with Britain and like all the big European powers like turned into these dictatorships, like punched in the nose and taken down to their knees and defeated.
Yep.
That like post-war era of decolonization movements coupled with like this like new wave of like, oh, fascism is this like legitimate form of government. You could have like a fascist nationalist movement in like India to push out the British or whatever's left of the British, or like,
oh yeah, because there was already one.
And so if you think about it, it actually could continuously reinforce that nationalism movement in Europe, because they would constantly be fighting somebody, because it'd almost be like it'd be a recurring cycle. The Africans and the Indians and other people under this empire would become nationalistic themselves, but that would threaten the nationalism of the empires, who would then become more, sort of dedicated to nationalism and fascism stuff to then fight and continue, and the wars and everything would be continuous to keep the empires going. Man.
Nationalism, kids, not even once.
So, that's now that I think about it, that's pretty much the state that the world could be from this one possibility.
So
but that's only one possibility.
The Earth in 2018 is like one of like what, like nonstop chaos, right?
Man,
I think to myself, what a shitty world.
I'm thinking really like, I don't even know. This is almost like,
to throw another wrench, what happens when nukes enter that picture?
Oh, now I think about it, nuclear holocaust of any resistance. That would be the future. The future would be places like India and Africa would basically be completely wiped out of natives if we were going far enough.
Like Fallout IRL.
Yeah, like, I mean, Europe.
There you go. There you go. Ace. My number one step back fan, Ace. Your idea of Canada dealing or America dealing with its contingency plan to invade Canada resulted in the entire world being a nuclear disaster zone. I hope you're happy.
Which we could indirectly say to mean don't mess with Canada.
Well,
that's the lesson
actually, it wouldn't technically be a nuclear disaster. It wouldn't be like a total nuclear war. It would be like limited. It would be worse. It would actually be more fucked up than that. It'd be limited nuclear exchanges to wipe out like population zones in Africa and India. So it wouldn't be like a total, ecological disaster. It would basically just wipe out populated civilized areas in Africa and India, basically turning them into nothing but like tribal, sort of like Stone Age. They basically bomb them back to the Stone Age, or fauna. And I mean Europe.
Fallout. It would be Fallout.
No,
most of the world would be Fallout,
but,
except for like Europe.
Well, it depends on how much they use it. If they nuke at least 10 or 12 times, I think it was that if you nuked 1,000 times, it wouldn't actually have such a catastrophic effect on the world. So I think if they at least detonated 1,000 times nuclear bombs, that'd be enough to bring these fragile African resistance movements or civilizations to their knees. And so that'd be pretty much it. Anytime Africa or India then rise, you just nuke them, and that would be the precedent. That'd be the way you do it. So yeah.
But then Wakanda steps out of the shadows and saves the day.
Oh yeah, we got someone in the chat who said Fallout New Africa, and I would play the shit out of that game.
Oh, that'd be weird. That could take place in like Ethiopia or something like that. Ooh.
Have they done? You did a video on Fallout lore, didn't you, Cody?
Yeah.
So like, how come they haven't done like Fallout Paris or something? Like, what happened to the rest of the world?
Because the fun aspect of because in the lore, Europe basically split itself into like several nationalistic states, and they basically wiped themselves all out before the war actually happened. And also the whole fun and gag of Fallout is that it's this sort of 1950s Americana. That's kind of the whole joke of it.
Yeah.
So who knows? I mean,
the Pit Boy and everything.
If they did Fallout like in Paris, I'm sure that'd be interesting. Considering Bethesda's track record, though, with non-American voices, I'm pretty sure it'd be a cringe fest. Oh God! Imagine,
those Swedish accents in Skyrim are so bad.
Yeah, imagine a French accents with Bethesda AI. Oh God!
Oh no, the nukes, they have gone off.
Yeah, Fallout is pretty much a game that's just meant to satire Americans, and that's the whole well, not Americans, but that sort of Americana 1950s sort of retro Jetsons aesthetic.
And for some reason, soda overtakes Coca-Cola and Pepsi.
The mutants post like the Fallout thing in Europe turns it into a Tamriel, and that's how it all bridges together.
Oh.
It's all one universe.
Oh no! Wait, where's Daedra and all of that come in handy? Does that mean Daedra technically exists in the Fallout universe?
I mean, obviously.
Oh man. I think we can. This is about 15
Fallout
minutes.
New Skyrim. That's the next Bethesda game.
I think we can actually start getting to questions now. You guys want to do that?
Sure.
Awesome. So I think we're gonna answer a little bit. So let me look. I am looking. Okay. So this is gonna be for in case anybody actually is wondering about the whole channel. This is gonna be a channel update. Boy asks, will you upload more? Yeah, so actually I'm starting to get onto the schedule of every week or 2 weeks I upload a video. So sometimes it becomes a month, and that usually happens like once a year. Or actually it's twice a year. Every 6 months or so, I kind of have this break. Um, but with this, I'm starting on a new schedule. That it's either going to be every week or every 2 weeks on the weekends. Either Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, I'm going to upload a video, and I'm gonna try to keep that. But if I go a week without a video, don't worry. The next week, it's probably going to be uploaded. Um, if it's a 10-minute video, it's usually going to take 2 weeks now with my editing style, because my editing has become a lot more. I guess you could say there's so much going on. It's so dense. But then, if it's going to be 1 week, it's going to be like a 5 or 6 minute video. Just something to tide people over. So anyway, yes, I am going to upload more, and I'm going to upload later this week.
He also uploaded today, and you should watch the video.
I did. Yeah. I did upload today. It doesn't seem like a lot of people actually watch that. Oh boy.
I do have one question, and this has been coming up a lot with the people, and that is this show.
Yeah.
The syndication of this show. When is that going to start picking up again?
I actually tried to download the audio for the only reason the last week's didn't actually get uploaded was because I was trying to download the podcast audio, and it took so long. It was like 2 hours that I basically didn't have time to do it. So I'm actually going to do that later.
All right, Cody, give me access and give me the unlisted link, and I'll do it for you. I'll take care of this.
Okay, I'll do that.
Just let me upload to the So That Happened YouTube channel, and I'll take it from there.
Okay, cool. Because the only reason okay, cool. But anyway, yeah, this is going to also become syndicated. So basically everything from last week on, it's going to be syndicated. I think we got better enough. So, let's see. Do you guys see any, I'm
checking out the hashtag now.
We don't have a hashtag.
Yes, we do.
We have a
Ask STH.
I didn't know that was
hashtag
a
Ask STH on Twitter.
I didn't know that was a hashtag we had.
Nobody's tweeted on it 7 hours.
I see one from a few days ago that we never got to. Do we see another space race growing?
I don't think so. I mean, it depends on what your definition of a space race is. I want to call it
like Tesla.
I want to call
maybe
it.
It'll become like a space race between businesses as opposed to like countries.
I wouldn't call it a space race. I would call it maybe like a space explosion, like a renewed interest in space.
Well, maybe like first to get to Mars.
Well,
still, there's not like the Soviet, like the thing is about why they call it the space race is because the only reason the space race happened was it was not a race to get somebody to the moon. It was a race to develop long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles. Once they got that, the moon was kind of the PR reason for that.
If you think of it, the moon was kind of a bigger version of the Roadster in space. No, but no, I'm joking. But anyway, yeah, I mean, there isn't that political thing behind that. So I don't think there's going to be a new space race. I think we don't compete with China, we don't compete with Russia. But there is going to be
one.
What?
I could see a space race picking up in the near-term future if this asteroid mining thing becomes as big a gold rush as people say it's going to be, because then fighting over who's going to get like the asteroid that they find is like 99% platinum, like that.
Asteroid XT2B Delta belongs to America. Yeah. No, it belongs to the Germans.
Yeah, I could see that. If there was like a race for that, then there definitely could be. But for now, I think we're just, for at least the next 10 years, we're going to just see a renewed interest in space. And I think a lot of that is just because of SpaceX and because of, sort of the new technology that's happening. So,
yep.
Yippee.
So we have a super chat from Brent Yoon. What if the Indian Revolution of 1857 was somehow successful?
I don't...
So somehow the Indians, at least for now, managed to drive the British off the subcontinent. Since at this time it was owned by the East India Company as opposed to the actual British government.
I mean, if anything, it'd be pretty detrimental to the British in World War I and II, because they used a lot of Indian resources to, help them in the war effort. I'm not very well, I don't really know a lot about Indian history, or Indian ramifications of that. So, do you guys have an idea for that?
Well, I mean,
I'm not super good at India.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not an expert either, but from what I know, even if they somehow drove out the soldiers hired by the British East India Company, because at first, British India was literally just owned by a company. So, like, the British Army wasn't even there. They just kind of had their own, like, hired mercenaries, essentially.
Yeah.
And what the rebellion started over was someone spread around some rumors that, one of those armies forced the soldiers to grease their muskets with pig grease and cow grease, which upset both the Muslim population and the Hindu population of India.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of like a straw that broke the camel's back after a lot of atrocities and bad PR moves had been happening. And so that created a rebellion. And the problem was it's also called the Sepoy Mutiny because a lot of the British East India Company's army were local Indians, which is why what ended up happening was the British government had to step in and say, sorry, we're taking over India and we're sending our actual army there. And it took 3 years to suppress. So if somehow this Indian rebellion succeeds and we have an independent India, I honestly don't see it lasting long. Even if Britain gets beaten once, they'll try to come back.
Yeah.
Whether they'll be able to take all of it back, I don't know, but I just can't imagine it lasting long. But that's my 2 cents.
Tiger Star, you have people in the background speaking.
You have a party going on. It's like you're doing the show in the middle of a party.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
This is Tiger Star repeating from Greg's basement. Yeah, pretty much.
Sorry, Greg's a dick and he won't turn his music down.
I'm sorry.
Greg?
I guess it's the TV.
Greg is the new Jimmy. Greg is the Tiger Star Jimmy. Why not?
Oh my.
Oh my.
We do have a couple super chats.
We do.
So the one is, what if the Ottomans won the Battle of Vienna?
Kurwa.
That's a tough one because it's one of those things where it's short term the Ottomans might have been able to get their foothold, but long term I think I mean they probably the rest of Europe wasn't ever going to be let's work with the Ottomans.
I mean, it's pretty much. You do that. I'm gonna get a drink.
France did though, because France made an alliance with the Ottoman Empire. As shocking as it was, in fact, Europe was very pissed off about it. And specifically, France had a rivalry with the Habsburgs. So if somehow the Ottomans got control of Vienna and France decided to capitalize on that and maybe attack the Habsburgs elsewhere, maybe in Spain, Belgium, whatever, then in that case, the Ottomans would have quite a foothold, because if the Habsburgs are gone, then the only thing that's in their way of the local area would be Poland and Russia, and maybe what's left of the Holy Roman Empire. But without Austria, they really wouldn't be much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then do you think that there actually could have been a long-term Ottoman placement, or where there would actually be? The thing that I could think of is just that the Ottomans would probably have had that old sick man of Europe thing still happen, but that today you'd have much more of that Muslim Turkish influence that you see in places like Bulgaria, but it would be as far as Austria.
Oh yeah, it would just delay the inevitable.
So you'd probably have a lot more of a Muslim influence in the Balkans, which probably make the Balkans a lot less explodey in the late 19th century.
Well, plus a lot of the problems in the Balkans that arose in the 1800s, Austria acted that on. And for example, they took Bosnia for themselves, which is what forced Serbia to, the Serbian terrorist group, the band, to get all crazy, assassinate Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
All right, so we've already all world history completely.
Potentially, yes, because if Austria has to rebel and get its independence, just like every other Balkan state, then they wouldn't be able to be such rivals with the Ottoman Empire like they were in the 1800s to begin with. So Austria wouldn't be able to add that on. But the one power that could is Russia, because Austria was constantly trying to counterbalance Russia's influence in the Balkans. Because Romania and Bulgaria and Serbia looked up to Russia quite a bit. And part of Austria taking Bosnia was to make sure that Russia and its allies didn't become too powerful in the Balkans. And when the Ottomans were defeated in 1878, the Russians essentially forced them to sign a treaty called the Treaty of San Stefano. And it essentially made Uber Bulgaria. It gave Russia a lot of territory, and the Ottomans would have been almost completely out of the Balkans in 1878. But Austria kind of stepped in last minute and made an alliance with the British to kind of intimidate the Russians to step down and replace that treaty with the Treaty of Berlin, which just kind of led the way of the Balkans becoming like how it did the World War I era.
All right.
So
hashtag Hail Sultan.
Yeah, so with Austria gone, either the Ottomans simply last longer, or Russia ends up getting enough influence to where the Balkans become Russian hegemon.
Let's see if I can make hashtag Hail Sultan catch on.
I was not following literally any of that. I
basically he thought
no, you don't have
he
to
thought
explain.
his way through about how
yeah
basically all of world history would be different because Vienna. The next question, I guess it's from the next question. It's not so much a question as it is a statement from the best porn name I think I've ever seen, which is Justice McGinnis.
Oh my.
If you really think about it, does having so many nuclear weapons to prevent war make it so countries like North Korea, who are starving their people and are harder to stop because they retaliate with nuclear warheads? The answer to that question is yes. That's why.
That seems like if you really think about it, doesn't.
All right, there's the whole mutually assured destruction that creates a sort of peaceful situation. But on top of that, it does let regimes like North Korea oppress their people, starve their people, because they become invasion proof once they have nuclear weapons.
Yes. Maybe, but North Korea would have oppressed its people with or without nukes. And considering they didn't get them until 2009, I think, then, they obviously were oppressing their people well before 2009.
Yeah, they had China with that as a nuclear power. If China didn't have nukes, they would have done it.
I would say that, pretty much, we already saw the same exact situation in the 1930s, and there was no nukes back then. Simply not wanting to have a war is deterrent enough. Nukes, like nuclear, Armageddon or nukes attacking your cities is kind of just icing on the cake for that. So I would say even if North Korea lived in a world that there was no nukes, we would still be really wary of actually attacking them.
Because really, if you cynically look at things, the times that we actually intervene to help a country, it's only when it serves our interests. And that's just how politics work. Like, for example, when we defended South Korea the first time around, it was in our interest because we wanted to make sure that the UN wasn't going to become a League of Nations. So we had to show that we were strong and we were going to lead, and that we were going to lead the world against the Soviet bloc or whatever. And then, of course, the Persian Gulf War, that was all about the oil and stuff like that. But if we're in a world where there's no nukes, somehow the U.S. is still the world power or whatever, and North Korea is oppressing its people, we won't just go, oh my gosh, this is terrible. We need to intervene and invade North Korea to stop this, because it just wouldn't serve our interests.
Yeah, the
Which
best thing that would stop that would get the North Korean regime to be overthrown by the U.S. is if they just found a gigantic oil reserve underneath Pyongyang.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's a huge one.
Because it's why we didn't, for example, help with the Rwandan genocide like we promised we would after the Holocaust. It's because it just didn't serve our interests, sad to say, so we did nothing.
So, moving on from that, Justice McGinnis also asks, what if nuclear warheads weren't developed until the 1950s after World War II, and Operation Downfall happened? Okay, so I'm just going to answer one of those, because it seems like it's a two-parter.
Everybody wants their own video.
Yeah, well, Operation Downfall, actually, I already did a video about that, so if you want to see my thoughts on that, then I guess watch that. But what if nuclear warheads weren't developed until the 1950s after World War II? I'm thinking,
Is
really...
Operation Downfall like where the U.S. just wanted to just keep pushing up to Moscow after the war?
No, Operation Downfall...
Unthinkable.
Operation Downfall was the invasion of Japan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we would have lost 1 million men, occupied half of Japan, while the Soviets maybe get Hokkaido, maybe.
Well, I don't know if we... Yeah, I don't know if we would have lost 1 million men, but we definitely would have... I mean, the fire bombings enough were, sort of that pushed Japan over the edge. So who knows? I mean, even I guess if we didn't have nuclear bombs, we would have just substituted it with even more horrific fire bombings of their cities until there was like literally nothing left. But anyway, if one sec. Anyway, if nuclear weapons weren't developed until the 1950s, taking Japan out of the equation, I don't think really too much would have actually changed, because from basically after the war until I guess you could say that the Soviets tested their bomb in what, the 1949 49.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
So really not, but like that's a year. Like that basically was like 1 year that nothing really would have changed, because it was until then it was only the United States that had that bomb. So I would say that history really wouldn't change that much if it was at least.
Yeah, I mean, like there's no like no
small baby boom. That's about it.
Yeah.
There's no like no inventing the nuclear bomb. Like it would just happen.
Yeah, and I mean, if anything, this would I think he's just saying that it would be like a 5-year delay. So it'd be like until the 1950s, but then, since the Cold War really didn't start until the Soviets tested that bomb, it doesn't have huge ramifications, because even though the Cold War started in the 1940s, it was less about the nuclear war part. It was more about the big old Russian army and the American army in Germany.
Yeah, the Cold War ends in 1996 instead of 1991.
I'll also do a quick answer for Jose, who asked what if Republicans won the Spanish Civil War, and the answer is probably that Spain would still be neutral, but more friendly with the Allies than allied with the fascists, because either way, the war left Spain in pretty rough shape, and I don't think it would have been back on its feet until like the 50s. I think I recall correctly.
Spain isn't really a huge power player in any of it. In modern history, Spain is like no power. So, sorry, Spain, if you're listening.
Should we have this super chat question be the last super chat question?
North Dakota guy.
I like that. Yeah, this will be the last super chat question. I actually think we can start wrapping it up if you guys like that.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So fuck South Dakota. North Dakota is best Dakota. I love that name, by the way. Says, hey, North Dakota back here. Hail best Dakota. Anyways, what would happen if the states split apart during World War II and each joined a World War II faction?
Well, there's a mod for Hearts of Iron 4 where you can test that out.
Shameless plug. But no,
I'm imagining that not all states would even join the war to begin with. A lot of states would just want to be left alone, just do nothing.
Yeah,
most states, if they're independent, are basically third world countries that don't really have, like, trust me, there's no industrial powerhouse of West Virginia or I would argue even like Indiana or Kentucky.
I would say what you could do if we had each state, this is two scenarios basically. This is first, every state becomes its own country, which is an entirely different scenario in itself. But two, it's also each state is forming an alliance. So first, each state is a country. So which states are going to be the major powers? It's going to be California,
New York, California, Texas.
I would say
maybe Ohio if it's like industrialized.
I would say 1920s, 1930s Ohio, definitely. I would say the Midwest, actually, pre-Rust Belt, isn't the Rust Belt, it's the major industrial center of the United States.
Michigan gets like the highest economy in the world just by selling cars.
I would say Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois could combine into a state, into like a single country. In fact, a lot of the Midwest would probably combine into a single Midwest state.
They form an American syndicalist car union.
Yeah. What's it called? Texas would pretty much conquer New Mexico, Arizona.
They'd finally annex Waco County in Oklahoma or whatever that place is called.
The South would probably band together into a new CSA. I think a lot of the states that are pretty much third world nations in themselves would just band together with other nations or with other countries.
Which in this time would be like the Great Plains and mountain states, really.
Yep. California would be its own thing. It could take the West Coast. But then I would say
Alaska just gets taken by British Canada.
Like if we're trying to think of in terms of Axis and allies, I kind of want to say like it's almost like, this sounds weird, but it's almost like all of them I think would be allies. I don't think really any of them.
I don't know. The CSA.
The CSA.
Opinions about race.
Yeah, but I mean, we had opinions about race too, but we joined the Allies.
But the thing is that you forget Nazi Germany hated the South. Absolutely hated them. They saw them as degenerate because they basically let, the blacks completely change their culture. So they didn't see them as this like pure German society. They saw them as a bunch of mutts. So I don't think Germany would even let the South become join the Axis powers. In fact, I think they just insult them.
Or they would do that thing that they did several times where they're like, yeah, we'll help you, and then like not doing it.
Well, I think that because the South would still have their British fetish, they would probably just join the Allies. I mean, back then, being racist and not liking non-whites didn't disqualify you from, being the Allies. That's the, that's not, everybody hated minorities. It's not like a crazy thing. So you could still fight Nazis while still hating blacks. So I'm pretty sure the South would definitely, they'd hate everyone that's not the South, but they'd still be for the Allies.
Maybe because like North Dakota is still like 40% German, they could have like a pro-Nazi coup or something like that.
If anyone would actually have a pro-Nazi anything, it would be in the Midwest, like we discussed before. But
in fact, like even today, North Dakota is 46.8% German, and South Dakota is 44.5% German. Wisconsin is 43.8% German, and Nebraska is 42.7% German, and that's today.
What's Ohio?
Ohio is 26.5% German. That's still 3 million people. So
that seems. Wait, what's the highest?
I think that we're not addressing the importance of the West Virginian Empire.
Wait,
West Virginia?
No. Virginia decides it was separated for too long and just takes it back.
What's the highest ethnicity?
West Virginia gets
Blue
mad
Mama.
and decides to. West Virginia takes its revenge, and Virginia gets renamed East West Virginia.
But anyway, I was actually
Cody,
thinking about this. I was actually thinking. Wait.
To answer your question, North Dakota was the highest percentage at 46.8% German, but that's based off the 2000 census.
I was asking,
so
what's
I
the
imagine
actual highest? What's the highest ethnicity in Ohio? Since German is 26%.
American. I don't know.
Oh, I was thinking because you had a thing on it. Okay. Anyway, no, but I was thinking like New York would actually be kind of interesting too, because they'd have they'd have that sort of Italian diaspora. Maybe they.
I just imagine like right away New York City secedes from New York.
They become Mussolini worshippers and shit. Like it's like, oh, we gotta rejoin Italy. But yeah, so if anything would have actually joined the Axis, it would probably be the Midwest. But other than that, I don't see. I think I see the struggle between the Allies and the Axis less about sort of the race policy that the Nazis had, and it's more of the culture. It's a cultural fight. It's the fight between sort of this democratic capitalism and between this totalitarian, like, you know, that was the fight. It was the government systems. I think, you know, I mean, I think even Nazi Germany borrowed their eugenics program from the United States, who was super democratic back then too. So it was like, you know, it wasn't as black and white as simple. So all the states would be pro-ally. They would just have varying degrees of racism. But yeah, I think that is a perfect way to end the podcast. Do you guys think?
Yeah.
Yep.
the depressing thing, the whole statement of that. Anyway, so yeah,
all of these scenarios were very depressing.
I actually liked what I like is that this is like the first time we were actually able to have a majority alternate history related podcast on an alternate history channel. What craziness.
Yeah, if you guys like this more than the average, you guys should let us know on Twitter. We're taking feedback.
Definitely. So to end this all off, I'm going to thank all of our Super Chat contributors. Phone Wizard, Sarah Jackson, Brent Yoon, Brian Shroud 72, Justice McGinnis, Fuck South Dakota, North Dakota's Best Dakota, Will Marlett, Jose
well, there goes
Agramante.
There goes our South Dakota population.
I'm sorry, South Dakota. And thank you all for contributing. Thank you everybody for watching. We will be back next week, 8 Eastern Standard Time. This was the So That Happened podcast. I'm Cody.
Same alternate channel, same alternate place.
Oh, I hate you so much. Anyway, I'm Cody.
I'm Emperor Tiger Star, the creator of horrible puns.
And I'm Tristan from stepbackhistory.com.
Get out of here, everyone.